Okay, go.
News flash. Dateline, Port Angeles, Washington, June 1942. Just 6 months following the attack on Pearl Harbor, the small Coast Guard air station in Port Angeles was attacked. This is a true story. The episode starts with the station's commanding officer, Lieutenant Donald B. McDiarmid. Captain Mac, as he was known, arrived in Port Angeles fresh from flight training in 1938, describing the place as the 8-ball station. He served his first year of nearly 5 here as aircraft engineering officer. However, he filled out the remaining tour as commanding officer. At one time, as the war manpower level bloomed, he had a command with 30 officers and 600 enlisted men. Captain Mac, a real-life character, often expressed frustration over the lack of aggression by his officers. He had a reputation for requesting combat duty of any kind as the war waged, and he watched men assigned to him sent off to fight. In frustration to being denied his demand for war duty, and perhaps also due to the tone of Captain Mac's letters to the Admiral in Seattle, he was reportedly offered a spot promotion if he would just cease his demands for transfer to combat. In character, Captain Mac refused the promotion. Typical missions at Air Station Port Angeles shortly after the war began involved patrolling while seeking out Japanese submarines and offering protections for shipping in the Strait of Juan de Fuca and along the Washington coast. These patrols were flown twice daily from Port Angeles, once at dawn and again at dusk. Frequent submarine sightings were reported to the military authorities. Nearly all, however, were deadheads, derelict logs jutting just above the water's surface. In the war panic at the time, almost anything appeared to be Japanese invaders. For Captain Mac, chasing deadheads was more than a minor irritant. He took a reluctant pilot on a mission to show the hesitant airman what he meant by a long-range mission. On this day's patrol, after takeoff with a twin-engine JRF amphibian airplane, he switched both engines to run off one of the 2 equal tanks of gasoline, then proceeded westward away from the coast in a straight line out into the Pacific Ocean. Later, when the engines, starved for fuel, coughed, he switched both over to the remaining tank and started back to base with the comment, "That's what I mean about max range." The Coast Guard Air Station at the end of Edis Hook in June 1942 consisted of a concrete building with offices and quarters for the crew, a hangar, seaplane ramps, docks, and 2 runways crossing at a shallow angle. The main east-west runway ran along the North Beach, as it does today, and was then protected by 6 machine gun emplacements, 4 at the corners and 1 on each side near the middle. Each nest had held twin 30 caliber Lewis machine guns. The main building was set about the midpoint of the long runway on the south or harbor side. Demolition charges were placed at each end of this building. They were the standard Navy 325-pound depth charges fused with an electrical detonator to destroy the building in the event of an enemy landing. Early in World War II, the military on the West Coast was preparing for a Japanese invasion, and Captain Mac was not pleased with the preparation by his unit for war. Despite repeated rebukes to his executive officer for his junior's seemingly lack of energies dedicated to preparation, Captain Mac deemed his station not ready for an attack. Therefore, he resorted to his typical brazen actions to remedy this problem. Captain Mac took William Morgan, Ordnance Man 3rd Class, and Red Merrill, bosun mate 1st Class, into his confidence. Morgan was directed to sneak around the barracks the night of Captain Mac's planned drill and gather up all the rifle ammunition. Each man had a Springfield rifle slung to his bedpost. Then, early in the morning, Morgan waited in the machine gun nest across the runway from the cruise building, holding 5 sticks of dynamite. During the night, the bosun also created shallow puddles of oil scattered about the station. Captain Mack took off in a JRF from the local airport, today known as Fairchild, where he had parked the airplane earlier in the evening. Shortly, he had the amphibian screaming in at low altitude over the base in pre-dawn darkness. This was the signal for Morgan to start flinging his sticks of dynamite out into the water off the North Beach into the strait, away from the station. Then fire the machine guns at a smoke float dropped from the airplane in the nearby water. Meanwhile, Merrill set the puddles of oil ablaze, creating a realistic scene. Men came tumbling out of the building through doors and windows, carrying with them empty rifles, dashing to the air raid trenches. One sensible sailor, like the fictional television character Deputy Sheriff Barney Fife, kept a bullet in his pocket, just in case. He was ready for the enemy, and the only one, but his rifle accidentally fired as he fell into the air raid trench. The bullet passed between the legs of an ensign, arriving just ahead of him. Tracer bullets from the machine gun trained by Morgan were ricocheting off the water and making a fiery exhibition, and the station glowed from Merrill's fires. Behind both and across the narrow spit, a U.S. Navy ship lay at anchor in the peaceful harbor. The Navy crew, suddenly hearing the noises of war, went immediately to general quarters. The ship's crew was ready instantly. Pearl Harbor was not going to be repeated for this Navy ship. Gun crews at once commenced firing their 20mm machine guns at the only obvious target in the darkness, the circling U.S. Coast Guard JRF Goose. Captain Mack suddenly discovered he was now an unarmed defender with tracers blazing the night sky, coming his way instead of the attacker. He hurriedly retreated to safety north across the strait into Canada. Captain Mack's crew at the air station was a little more prepared than he assumed. One junior officer, before abandoning his coast for the air raid trench, got a message off to headquarters in Seattle declaring the Coast Guard was under enemy attack. An immediate wartime invasion signal was flashed up and down the entire west coast of the United States, putting all military on alert. Captain Mack was partly correct in his assessment of his unit's preparedness. No one remembered to detonate the charges to destroy the current administration building at the Coast Guard Air Station, which is now named for Captain Donald Bartram McDiarmid. And he finally got his wish for duty under fire. Note, aviators always precede an actual tale with true story. The end.